Hey, and welcome to Creative Leaders Unplugged. I'm Morgan, here with Arna, and today we're talking to Ekaterina Solimina, the founder of Future London's Academy.
We didn't ask her enough about herself, so she has to come back. But it was because she brought up all these topics and themes and ideas that sparked so many kind of things within ourselves.
We got so excited.
I
have like 3 different Post-it notes next to me now, next to my computer, with all these notes and inspiration that I took.
Yeah. What did you write down?
So one of the things, of course, she said, passion is a road to nowhere. And that kind of struck a chord because I'm like trying to find, okay, what am I super passionate about?
Yeah.
What can I?
Oh, no.
But she's like, yeah, passion is a road to nowhere. I'm like, oh, better reevaluate.
It's nice. It's a little bit like a poem, really, because you go like, oh, wait a minute. But what?
And then she tells us the road you should take, which I'm not going to say in this intro because I want people to listen to the podcast.
Yes, it's way at the end. Way at the end, she says, this is the trick.
Yeah. And then the other thing that does sound like poetry is she said something about creativity is all about connecting the dots, but you have to have dots to collect. Yeah. Or you have to collect dots to connect the dots.
Yeah. And then that sparked something within me. And then I went off on this long conversation with myself, mainly. There
was 3 people in this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it was like in my head, I went like, oh yeah, and then this and that and that and that.
So, but I think that's what happens with us, right? We have so many dots to connect and we're creative and we're used to highlighting, right? Somebody says a keyword and it instantly illuminates 3 or 5 or 7 other dots in our brain. And we get so excited and we want to share them. And
Yeah, exactly. And if you have someone on the show that has so many sides and there's so many things that you can look at that person from so many different angles, and then you go like, oh, and this angle, and you're like, oh, and that angle.
Yeah,
what about this angle?
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that conversation with her. She clearly has more to say. So I do really want to see whether we can invite her back on the show.
Yeah. And let us know what stands out to you so that we can also make sure we talk about it the next time as well. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have a LinkedIn page now. So because we are always wondering, if people have some ideas, some thoughts, something to kind of share with us, which is always difficult with a podcast because you can't just, there's no room underneath sort of the episode for comments. But there's a LinkedIn page. So look us up on LinkedIn and leave a comment. Let us know what you think.
Yeah. Or send us a message on LinkedIn as well. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah. Enjoy.
Okay.
I am a creative and I create things, and I'm also entrepreneur. So I do run a business, and I'm also a learner. I love learning, and my philosophy is to never stop learning and always seek new things and find new things and learn new things. So this is what I'm passionate about, those 3 things: learning, creativity, and building companies and doing great things. And that's what I do right now.
Okay. How do you learn all the time? How does that happen? Is that a conscious thing, or is it how do you do that?
Great question. And I think I was not conscious of it until I met Michael Wolff, with whom I worked for a very long time, and we're still very good friends. Some of your listeners might know he's the founder of Wolff Olins, biggest branding agency, or one of the most famous branding agencies. And he constantly talked about curiosity as part of what designers and creatives should have. And it is a muscle that you need to train, and you constantly need to be conscious about being curious. And in the moment, I didn't feel like it was a profound thought that needed to be remembered and applied. But the more I live through life, and he is, I think, 89 years old, and trust me, he's as curious as the person can be about everything that surrounds him, everything he sees, hears, everyone he meets. And I do realize that to stay creative and sharp like he is right now throughout life, you do need that curiosity. And that's how you learn, by staying curious. And I would also make a differentiation between interest and curiosity, because those two often get confused, because people might say, I'm not interested in sports. I'm not interested in, I don't know, this thing or spirituality, or there are certain things that I'm as a person not interested in. But curiosity, it's not about your interest. It's about opening your mind to the things that you don't know. Even if they don't lead to an interest, that's a second step. But being curious and asking questions, that's step number one.
Yeah, it reminds me of a conversation I had with well, actually, it was a client, but it was about, it's a very, very trivial thing. It was actually about they organized, or she organized something, and but people didn't show up, or some people didn't show up, and that really pissed her off. She was like, and I said, you can also think about it this way. You could say, hey, that's interesting. Why didn't they? I want to know. Let's find out. And she said, oh yeah, yeah, exactly. You can, because you can be curious about things that maybe are not even nice. So to your point, like, I don't like sports, but and yesterday I was at a concert, tiny in a person's house. It was kind of a big house, by the way. Anyway, the point was that the person making there was music, but he was in his 60s, and he was sort of what he was playing was very old-fashioned in a way. And my wife is sitting next to me thinking, oh, he's going to hate this. He's hating it. He's hating it. And I was like, but it's actually really interesting. I didn't like what he was playing because it was sort of, I don't know, I think my parents would kind of, but I was curious. I know curiosity can be such a, it's this open-mindedness and not judging. I think that's all, maybe that's part of it, right? So you're not judging 100%. It. Yeah.
Yeah, there was actually an interesting thought that someone else also shared with me, which is when we listen to other people, obviously, first of all, our thoughts are running throughout the whole time someone else is talking, which is normal. We're human. And it's very hard to really shut them down and really listen to someone and really be curious about what the person is saying, what they're trying to say, not what we think they're saying, what we want to answer, or what we think on the topic, but what is really person saying, and shutting down those thoughts and being really quiet in your mind. And as you said, stopping judging the conversation that is happening is probably the hardest skill anyone can learn. And truly sit with someone else's thoughts and give them opportunity to talk, and you have an opportunity to learn from it and stay curious about it. That's a hard skill.
Yeah, because you have so many biases. So we all do, right? So by recognizing them, thinking like, and so I think it's the ability of stepping out of you, basically of yourself a little bit, going like, what's going on? What's the context? Why do I respond this way? Or why do I feel this way? Or why do I have?
And it's making me think, because you're also saying, okay, if I'm not interested in sports, I can still show curiosity towards it. And if somebody does show enough curiosity towards sports, for example, and they're not interested, they're going to start to find similarities or common elements that connect to something they are interested in. But you have to dig past that first layer. And it reminds me of this really beautiful story. Is they were having this debate, and I think it was between like people who were very, very strongly pro-life and people who were very, very strongly pro-choice. And they're going to have a big debate. But they said, well, first, the night before the debate, we're going to have a big dinner with all of the participants, but you're not allowed to talk about this topic. You can talk about anything, but just not this topic. And so people got to really know each other, and you weren't allowed to ask which side the other person was on. You just had a conversation. And then they saw that the results of that debate were very different because they were able to be curious about each other as people first, rather than just, okay, well, this is how they feel about sports, or this is how they feel about whatever it is that they're talking about. And I think that's such a beautiful and really helpful trait as well.
Yeah, 100%. I can also share a fun story from my personal experience. So obviously, I run FutureLearn Academy, and our motto is never stop learning. So I'm trying to embrace that motto every day of my life. And part of it, I thought, how about I learn 30 new things in 30 weeks? So I tried 30 new hobbies. And the rules are, it needs to be something I've never done before. So it needs to be something I've never even attempted as a kid or at any point in my life. I can't say no. So I can't be judging and say, I don't think I like it. It's not my thing. So I have to say yes to whatever someone suggests or is available. And the third, it can't be on Zoom. It has to be physical. I need to go places. I need to meet people. And that has been the most incredible journey of my life. Not just learning new things, but learning a lot about myself and what kind of assumptions I have, because there were so many things that were suggested that normally I would say no to and say, I don't like those type of things. I'm not interested in that. But because the rule was not saying no, I had to go with it. And I had the silver lining. I only need to do it once. So it could be one class taking whatever, 1 hour of something. It doesn't need to be this big thing for the entire year, but I need to try and give it a proper try. If it's 1 hour class, I cannot leave. I need to suffer through it no matter what, but I need to do it and give my full self. And it was really interesting how all of these misconceptions that we have, that I won't like it because I'm not interested. Like you said, Morgan, like if you stop thinking about the topic and go one layer below, what am I learning here? What similarities does it have to what I do? Or what other opportunities are within this situation? It taught me so much. It was incredible. And I would recommend anyone who feels like they are maybe stuck or don't know what they want to do or can't find a new thing that they're passionate about. Stop looking for passion. It's a road to nowhere. Start with being curious about random things, and then maybe one of those random things become your interest, and that might develop eventually into passion. But you have to start with curiosity and open mind.
Yeah, well, because you know nothing happens from standing still. It starts from when you do something. Then when there's action, that generates more action. So even if whatever you do is not the thing you thought, that's the thing I really wanted. I think so. What you're actually saying, which is bigger than just finding a hobby or finding something or forgetting about your passion, is actually, I think we teach kids that you have to be something when you grow up, right? And I don't know anyone who became whatever they want, whatever they came up with when they were a kid. I'm sure some people did, but I think most people, because the world changes, and I don't know about you, but the job I do, if you want to call it a job, but anyway, that didn't exist. It wasn't even a thing, right? So, or I could not have imagined that. Like, even if I call what I do, like being a consultant, I think you had consultants back then, that meant nothing to me, right? So, how can you actually go through life? I think so. One, yes, continuous learning. I think so. A friend of mine, she talks about this, and she talks about it in the way she describes this is more life-wide learning. Is like being very broad. Like, it's not just about, because it's not just learning. It's actually taking a very broad perspective on things, like being curious. So you read things that you don't know anything about. You go, to your point, you try some hobbies, or some activities or some crafts that you have never done. You don't know if you're going to like it, but everything is connected somehow, because it's always about I don't know what to call it, the human condition, right? The human behavior. It's about community. It's about eye for detail. It's something focus. It's, so there's beauty in everything if you spend some time with it. So I think it's such a really fascinating topic, really. And I'm really curious about what do you say? 15?
30 hobbies.
30, like 30?
30, yeah. And it was intense.
Do you still know which one?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. It was incredible. I've tried anything from singing to circus trapeze, to driving a helicopter, to Reiki healing, tarot reading. It's as broad and diverse as it gets. Lots of sports,
Awesome.
Lots of crafts, but also lots of things that, again, I always said I'm not spiritual. I don't do these type of things. But it was actually really interesting to discover what else I was missing out and what can I learn from each of these experiences. So yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome, because it's also about, actually, this is the way to become more creative for people who don't do these things.
Yeah.
Because that gives you all these experiences. Even if you find it really difficult or annoying or whatever, that's learning about your own kind of boundaries and your own kind of, so we talked before the recording about creative leadership and design leadership. This kind of leads into that a little bit. I won't go into it straight away, but to me, a creative leadership is kind of stretching the boundaries of what people thought was possible. So giving people options that they didn't even know existed, or behaviors that they weren't aware that they were even allowed to do certain things. So giving people permission, or letting themselves give themselves permission to behave differently, to try something out, to try something and fail or not like it. And because, creative leadership, and as we talked about it before, is for, I'm going to exaggerate, but the linear thinkers, right? Who say, hey, I will have to go from A to B in a straight line. Otherwise I'm getting really nervous and scared because, my boss is going to hit me, or I'm not going to get my bonus or whatever. And so they're in a culture of fear. And we have to kind of teach them to say, no, that's not how you do things. That's not how you discover things. That's not how you grow. That's not how you grow as a human being, as a person or professional. You have to try all these different things. So in a way, what you've done is like, everyone should do that. I should do that, by the way. 30. I was like, how many things can you do? So
that's actually the best part, when you start running out of options and you have to crowdsource, because that's the best part, because these are the things you've never even considered.
Exactly.
So this is brilliant. But going back to your point about creativity, creativity is connecting dots that haven't been connected before.
Yeah.
And to have creativity, you need to have lots of dots, first of all, to connect.
Exactly.
So the more things you do, the more curious, again, you are about things that haven't been connected in your head or in anyone else's head, the more chances you have to be creative and start connecting all of these things together. So yes. I'm definitely aligned with you on the definition of creativity. Now, if we start talking about what is the difference between creative leadership and design leadership, I think that's an interesting debate to know. What are your thoughts? What's the difference?
Okay. Before I do that, I want to say something, because I always want to come across really smart. And I browse and steal stuff from other people and go like, yeah, you know something about the brain? I don't know anything about brain, but this thing that I've learned and is that, and I talk about this often in like when I do lectures and stuff, is that your memory and your imagination takes place in the same part of the brain. So it's actually the hippocampus. So there, if you remember things, that part of your brain is active. But if you imagine things, the same part of your brain is active. So memory, remembering things and imagining things are the same activity. It's the same thing. So to your point, you actually use all the experiences, the building blocks, I call it like the pieces of the puzzle that you had, and you create these new images from what you know, because you can't imagine new things from nothing. So you build from what you know, what you've experienced. So the more you experience, the more building blocks, the more pieces of a puzzle you have to create new images and imagine new things. So I think that's to me, it was amazing thing. Yeah, see, I told you. Yes. All right, sorry. Morgan, what is the difference between design leadership and creative leadership?
Yeah. So I actually spent all of my last summer studying the difference between art and design, but I didn't study it within the frame of leadership, but if we, start from the beginning. So I think creativity, as you said, is connecting the dots, right? Imagining something new. And a subsect of that is design. But design always has a very clear purpose. And sometimes it's not clear at first, but you say, yeah, this is the general direction we want to move. this is how we're going to bring it into reality, where art can kind of really start from an expression of self, and it doesn't necessarily have to accomplish something. And there's a bunch of pieces or things that really blur the line between art and design. Is it art? Is it design? Is it both? Is it neither? But I think creative leadership can be a bigger subsect or a bigger umbrella, perhaps, than design leadership. And I think the two are different, but there's also a lot of overlap between them as well.
That is a very interesting way to think about it. I don't know, because this is the conversation actually we're having for the first time, and I don't think there is a clear answer there. So I love how you have kind of different points of view and points of reference from your own education and how you went through this journey. I would put another layer on it and say what we spoke to Arne just before we started, language, which is in different languages, if you translate both, suddenly it becomes completely different things or the same thing. So now my point would be that maybe it's just the question of the language. And they are the same thing. And they are about connecting lots of dots and leading from this broader context of understanding where things are and having a purpose, for sure, because leadership without a purpose would be a strange thing. So I feel like there might be the same thing, just because we use English language to express it. Maybe that's why we stumbling upon different areas. But thoughts?
Yeah. And when you because like if you look at play, like play never has a purpose, right? Kids just sit down and they play. And but then to put the leadership framework on it, as you're saying, leadership without a clear goal doesn't make a lot of sense as well. So it's very interesting. But I think to be a good designer, you have to have creativity. And I think there's
but again, this is really good. It's interesting, by the way, because I think you do, but then it depends on what your definition of creativity is. Because I know designers who I wouldn't really call creative thinkers, except that they have a craft, but then, they can, within another context, they are, I don't know, they're not very creative thinkers. So it's interesting. So, language, I think there's something about language, because, and I was, what you were saying, Katerina, I don't know, what came up in my brain was that, if you have sort of the design leadership topic, and it's about designers learning about business, right? It just in general, you could say, there's creatives, designers, they have to understand business, because that's basically, a really important skill more and more to understand. It's also the language they need to learn in order to deal with business people, because that's the language their clients speak, or when they run a business or grow a business, or etc. So there's logic that they should learn the language of business, and then there's business people from a sort of a creative leadership point of view say, well, here are all these business people, and they need to learn the language of design because it's such a relevant thing to know. And it's language, but it's just that they were brought up, these two groups were brought up with a different language, and they were teaching them each other's language, really. And in a way, things like design thinking, for instance, is just a design language we teach to business people so they can speak to designers, and where designers go like, you're not a designer. Stay away from my language. All right. So that's another discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think I agree with your point that I think in the way we currently describe the two, you're absolutely right. I think when we talk about creative leadership very often, it does mean teaching traditionally the jobs that are not associated with creativity, because I don't think they're non-creative. Every job is very creative, but jobs that are not described as necessarily creative, teaching the language of creativity and possibilities there. And we talk about design leadership, it's kind of from a flip side, getting the designers, creatives, and them helping them understand the business context and what's their role within the large organization. Now, when they get to the top, I think then that means just basically having both. I think we can agree, whatever we call it, creative leadership or design leadership, having the business and creative mindset. That's what actually creates a superpower.
Well, and if you start becoming a leader, basically, and in my personal experience, if you become a leader, you stop being a designer. At least you stop having, you're not using the craft anymore. Other people do the fun stuff. You basically become the leader. But
I would kind of maybe challenge that, but okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. No. It's just that usually when designers become sort of leaders, they, a cliche is you start. I call this the agency trap. You are a designer. Yeah. You are really creative. You love your job. You love making stuff, and, et cetera, et cetera. Then you hire a few people. You become successful, and before you know it, you're just talking about people and with people about their retirement plans, and you're managing whatever, et cetera. You become a leader. And you're like, I wish I could make stuff. And anyway, so that's
but if you can get on the strategy level, then you can start designing from a high point of view, which is really
but that's
really the business stuff in between. Yeah.
But just making beautiful print and so anyway, distracting. But if you become a leader, when you become a leader, whether you are a leader from a business sort of angle or from a designer's angle, you become a leader. What are you going to do? You're going to create a culture or a safe space for people to actually be creative. So in that sense, it doesn't matter if you became this leader or from a business person, whatever background, and became a leader. If you want creativity to live inside your organization, inside your teams, then you become a person that needs to create that environment, and to me, that has always been creative leadership. Whether you're a designer or not, you are a creative leader because you create that space for people to become creative.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. And the research that I'm doing right now is about how you can work with multi-stakeholder parties and work in living labs. So how can you work with government, education, industry, communities, and move them all in a certain direction? And that is one of the key things that we're finding right now, is that it has to be a safe space for people to be able to be creative. But
and I'm also this is what you were saying, right?
Exactly. So you can design for that. Yeah. Okay. But then I'm also wondering, Ekaterina, because you're mentioning how important curiosity is to you. And then what was it like for you growing up? Because for me, I was always asking 1,000,001 questions. But my mom, sometimes I could see that she was tired, but she also did always encourage that. And so I'm always very grateful for that, looking back. And I think that led me to be who I am today.
That is a fantastic question. And I could definitely relate to asking lots of questions and maybe not even always communicating even the questions. I felt like I maybe didn't need to ask other people questions. I was asking them in my own head of like, why is this way? That's interesting. And going back to the point about memory versus imagination, I definitely have bad memory. Absolutely no memory there, which makes me make up things a lot. So as a kid, I had to make up things because I couldn't memorize them. Even in maths, because I actually studied math out of all subjects, maths and physics. So there you could do two things: either memorize every equation and formula to actually do really difficult stuff, or you could do it every time from scratch. So each formula obviously behind it has the logic and how people came up with it from the very axiomic basic things. So I very often had to do it from scratch just because I couldn't memorize it. So I had to make it again, make it up again, because it was easier for me. So in terms of curiosity and creativity, it definitely was there from the beginning, no matter what I was doing, even though I was doing again, what traditionally would be described as non-creative fields. And I went on to study programming, and it was C and C++, for those who know what they are. It's not that much fun. or at least not for me. But I have to say they were very creative. And I do admire engineers now who are incredibly creative in their work. And there is, in every field there is out there, whether you're doing business, engineering, finance, design, there is so much creativity that, again, going back to the question, what's the role of a leader? The role of the leader is still to be creative themselves and encourage and empower creativity within others. And actually, in terms of how we structured design leadership, or the meaning of design leadership within our program at Future London Academy. So we talked about these 5 layers of being a better person, building better products, building better teams, building better companies, and building better world. So it kind of starts from you, nothing else. You have to figure out what's going on in your head before you go and do anything in the world. But then it is about helping to build better products, whether you're doing it yourself, whether you're having other people. But then it's about building better teams, which does mean creating cultures and environments where teams can create incredible things, where they feel that psychological safety, where they are productive, where they are inspired to do fantastic things. And then if you want to make it commercial, then it is about building a company. I mean, the team can do lots of fun projects, and that's also fine. But if you want to build it to the next level, you might think about the business side of it and build a company out of it. And that will require understanding all sorts of like financial things, operational things, logistics and supply chain and everything in between that makes something a company. But the last layer of building better world, again, is something so crucial and so often forgotten within current educational system, within current leadership, everywhere, to be honest, about what as creatives or as leaders do we put out in the world. And not just from the kind of sustainability perspective or environment perspective, but from a very huge holistic perspective. How do we affect cultures that these products and services live in? How does it affect environments, people, the planet overall that we will continue living on? Mm-hmm. How our ideas and our products and services, what do they do for everyone on the planet? And we should, as especially creatives and creative and design leaders, be very conscious of that.
Yeah, it's such a but it's such a tough task to achieve, because we also, we might feel we don't have that control. We don't have that. You need to you have food on the table. You need to work. So you whatever job you get, you take it. It's very difficult to say no to a client if they give you if they pay the bills, right? So how do you give people that confidence that they actually, that they can actually achieve that and make a better world? I mean, even making a better you is often that's usually very difficult.
That's
as well.
The toughest.
It's probably yeah. Well, yeah, because I totally. I'm with you 100% on that. It starts within yourself. Because if you don't, it's all about empathy, right? Empathy for yourself. If you don't have empathy for yourself, how can you have empathy for others, et cetera, et cetera? So that's where it starts. But how do people become confident enough that they believe that going out in the world, they can actually make a change?
I mean, it requires an incredible power to actually do that. And you're absolutely right. There are so many different external circumstances that can affect where we are born, how we are born, where we are, what kind of jobs we have. So it is a privilege to have a choice. Any choice in general.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I do understand that I talk from the perspective of people who have a bit more choice than others, but from that point, that's where leadership happens. I feel like very often it's very easy to feel powerless and saying the leadership is left to whoever is in leadership positions. But I believe the leadership needs to happen on every level, no matter what you're doing, how you're influencing people around you. It could be your family that you're influencing. You don't need to have direct reports to be a leader. That's not about that. It's about how do you inspire people around you? What kind of purpose you have yourself as a human? It's about what you bring to this world. How do you encourage others to show up every day? This is what real leadership is. And it definitely doesn't need to be hierarchical. And there are so many, by the way, other models of leadership that somehow did not become popular in the Western world and in our current society, which have been successful for generations and generations in other cultures. I mean, the most popular one is Ubuntu, and there are many other examples. There is more leadership on the same level as circular leadership or any other formats that are not hierarchical, which do help with those choices where everyone actually can contribute to the change that we're bringing. So going back to the question, how does someone start this journey, or how does someone even make a change, a difference? I think starting with yourself and building your own self-awareness, understanding who you are, and again, going back to curiosity, being curious about things around you. That will be step number one, because that will be a foundation for everything else. Now, if you have that and you feel like you already been lucky enough to get to a point in life where you are actually physically managing people or companies or teams, and you have more power than I suppose you had before, so you can actually influence bigger things and decisions. That's where it becomes interesting, because it becomes less about you. It becomes about the people that are around you. And it's kind of a almost anti-intuitive thing that usually people who are driven to leadership have big egos. But when you are a leader, you need to leave your ego out, because that won't be productive in any sort of situation. So just a warning for anyone who's planning to be a leader, you will have to give up your own ego very quickly if you want to be successful.
That's a tough one. That's a tough call. I mean, I think because that's also part of our, especially in the West, but not only in the West, most cultures, unfortunately, leaders are, or people who want to become the leader. If that's a thing you actually want, and it's not because I mean, you can become a leader because you're doing things that people really like, and they see your strength in the role of leadership, but you're trying to do other things, and leadership is the way to do that. Or you just want to be a leader, right? That's the other thing. People are like, I just want to be a manager. I just want to have, I want to be a people manager. I want to have, because that's a career, but that's a very classic, a very traditional career. We actually have implanted into kids their heads, because if you go to, if you look at, students, for instance, like specifically business students, and they play. If you go into their sororities, their clubs, and the students are acting out the way they think. They should act because they think adults act that way. So they have their clubs, and they have their boards, and they have their, they do their thing. They wear their shirts. They wear their. So if you look at business students, what's wrong with the world. That's what I think. Like I go like, oh my God, really? That's how you think you should behave when you grow up. So you're kind of.
Don't start me on business schools. This is my biggest passion and anger about what the hell are we teaching people about what does it mean to run a business or be a leader, and what kind of things you should care about. Just if anyone listening here is considering doing an MBA ever, please don't.
Don't do it.
Ever don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but okay, but at the same time, if you do it with curiosity. And not with feeling that these are the rules and this is the way it's supposed to be. But it's actually, I would say, do both. Get a business degree and a design degree, or if ever. I'm a school dropout, by the way. I have no diploma, so I recommend that to everyone. Anyway, and just learn. Be curious. Just learn. I mean, you don't need school to learn, and unless if you're my doctor, you have to graduate, by the way, and if you are my pilot too, graduate, please. But otherwise, if you don't need to, why would you? The world is full of knowledge and things you can learn. Even YouTube. I mean, only YouTube alone is this database of skills and knowledge and people and et cetera, et cetera. So I agree with you. Yes. If I look at MBAs and what are we teaching them? What? But it's more that we there's no alternative. There's nothing to balance that, and I think that's also changing. I think I mean in a way what I'm doing, what you're doing, we provide sort of schools, education, training, what have you, programs for people to create a balance, right? You're telling designers about how to run businesses. I'm telling business people how to kind of create a creative space so they can actually talk to creatives, and the creatives can actually live in their spaces. And I kind of now I want to kind of link to something else we talked about, is this neurodiversity. Because not just neurodiversity, by the way, but diversity in general. Because that's the problem with these MBAs. And if you look at these kids, they're all looking. All the boys have white shirts on, and et cetera, et cetera. They look the same, they act the same, they think they have to behave in a similar way. How do we create this sense of this hunger for diversity? How do we create this feeling that if you are not in a group that is diverse, or there are no different kind of opinions or completely different people from a different background, etc., how do we make that sort of so that people are hungry for that? They go like, oh, wait a minute, we need someone who thinks very differently, because that's something we don't want. Usually in any organization now, you don't want to have these other voices because they are distracting and they're annoying, and you don't want to be wrong, and they keep telling you that it can be different. So how do you do that? Because I think that's a big part of what you do, right?
Yeah, and specifically if we talk about design leadership in our Design Leaders program, we make a big effort about creating different opinions in the room. So our program only can take 30 people. And last year we had over 5,000 applications for 30 spots, which was very lucky. And I mean, it's a privilege for us to choose the 30 people who will be in the room from around the world, some of the best creative minds and creative directors, heads of design in the world. But that's exactly the reason why we made the selection process a very, very deliberate and very difficult one. We interviewing people and to make sure not just that they come geographically from different places and different creative fields, whether it is architecture, interior design, branding, tech, or anything else, but also they come with different opinions. And it was actually very interesting and mesmerizing to watch 30 incredibly successful creative people, but coming from very different walks of life in one room, from different cultures, from different backgrounds, doing kind of different things, but also having a lot of similarities because it's still a creative sector. And then when someone presents to them or they're having a workshop on a particular topic, and the debates and conversations they have just based on what they know and what they experience is magical, and they challenge each other so much. And it's also interesting to see how they discover that that there is a completely different world out there that thinks differently, and how much they start valuing different points of view. I mean, they already do that as creatives. I think we're always open-minded, but just seeing that happening in one room, it is quite magical. But you're right. If the space itself, if you go to MBA, if you look at any MBA course and you see how the graduates look, how professors look, and we know how they look, then you don't feel like you fit in. Someone interviewed for the program and her story was hilarious. So she said she went to the open days at Harvard, MIT, kind of all the big schools to do the executive MBA. Because she's already head of design, but she wanted to learn the business. And she's like, I went with my pink hair, and she's like, just normal self, just whatever she is as a creative person at a very senior position within a creative organization. And she went in and she's like, everyone was staring at me and everyone was like, ooh, you have pink hair. And she just felt so strange because it's nothing strange about pink hair at all. So the fact that she constantly felt like being watched and being out of place because everyone else, as you said, was wearing a white shirt and looking a certain way. So that obviously creates a difficulty for any MBA to attract diverse students because they just don't feel comfortable there because everyone looks the same. So we only can create diversity, whether it's in education or in the world, if there are diverse examples out there. So other incredible people want to be part of those crowds and those incredible organizations and communities because they know they will fit in with their weirdness, with their story, with their whatever they are, exactly how they are.
Yeah, I'm visualizing it. It's the pink hair and
the Harvard white shirts. Yeah,
yeah, that's kind of funny. All the suits going. But then probably somewhere inside of them being very jealous of the freedom of expression someone has, and they don't have it in the actual. Because if you get to know people personally, most people are really looking for the same things. And it's just that we are kind of, we're caught in kind of within a certain context, and we think we have to behave in that certain way to survive. And we look at our peers and we go like, well, they behave this way. So, it takes a lot of courage to do something different. So, change happens because of social evidence. So there's enough people around you that actually, and I think the tipping point is like 25% or something of people around you that are, doing things differently. And then you might want to also change. And so the pink hair example reminds me a little bit of this. There in the 60s, you had this, I think it was Candid Camera. And there was an experiment they did. It's the elevator experiment. You can look it up on YouTube. It's such a fascinating thing. And I used it the other day at a course because it makes such a great point. It's such a great metaphor. The elevator experiment is that so there's a bunch of people standing in an elevator. Usually you are facing the door, which makes sense because that's where you kind of want to walk out again. And there's usually the buttons and the number of the floor that you're on, et cetera, et cetera. But everyone was sort of in on the experiment, except for one person. She didn't know what's going to happen. So there's a whole bunch of people in the elevator. They're watching the back of the elevator, not the front. They're watching the back, and it's a U.S. I think it was U.S. experiment, and in the U.S. because this can also be different in different cultures. But in the U.S. you face the front, so they face the back. Except for this lady, because she didn't know. She walked in and she just faced the front of the elevator. But then she started noticing, like, oh, everyone's watching the back, and then people got on and got off, and they were all in on it. And they were all facing the back, and then slowly you saw her kind of turn. And so the experiment is, we were watching the modern version of it, but the old version, they have a couple of rounds with different people, and all of them slowly turn around. Slowly. They don't want to go like, oh, we're all facing the wrong way. There we go. No, you go like, and like, oh, I have a little bit of an itch here, and you kind of slide a little bit over to the wall. Before you know it, you're facing the back. That as a metaphor, because you feel odd. You don't want to stand out, so you start behavior. It's group behavior, group pressure. We all know it. It happens to us all and all the time. But so if we want to make a change, how do we make sure that we have enough examples that people have other options, and it's safe enough for them to say, I'm going to have pink hair too.
This is so right. And to be honest, it is what you're describing is absolutely normal. As humans, we want to fit in. We want to find our tribe. We want to be accepted. That's totally normal. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. So all these behaviors, they're not they're not evil in any way. They just normal to anyone who wants to be around people, to be accepted. So we dress like people expect us to dress. And even like with the creative, like sometimes you feel pressured to be very creative, and that could be also.
You don't have pink hair.
Yeah, and there is a pressure.
Have pink? He's wearing a suit.
Yeah,
he can't be a creative.
Yeah, exactly. So we do create all of these situations ourselves, but I think the world is changing, and this is fantastic. I think the more and more people are accepted for who they are, wherever they are, they don't need to change. And it's not universal yet, but I think there are pockets of that changes happening. And we started talking about neurodiversity, which is something I personally feel incredibly passionate about, because this is one thing that is not visual or not visible necessarily. So yeah, we can talk about pink hair and all the other things, while the diversity that not necessarily can be seen, which one of them is neurodiversity, is even tougher to work with, because we have so many misconceptions around and so many labels, where there is ADHD and dyslexia and kind of any other thing that falls under category of neurodiversity. And we have all the stereotypes of someone who can't sit still or someone who can't write, which is, by the way, not very helpful at all to either side of the equation, but also is not inclusive and doesn't create this safe space that we just described, where everyone can be accepted for who they are. And what was fascinating for me to learn when I started diving into this topic, and by the way, on the program, we also teach neurodiversity, which is incredible. And we have incredible psychologists who specifically talk about how to run neurodiverse teams if you are a leader, or become better as a leader if you are a neurodiverse leader, and how to create the environment. And you're very right to say that it is about environment that we create. So if basically, to simplify a very huge topic that probably needs many, many hours to talk about, but all these things that we label around, like different things that we describe, can fall under kind of three categories of executive processing, our social processing, and visual processing. And essentially, combination of those create who we are. And all it means is just we have different visual processing or social processing. So example of different social processing could be someone who doesn't want to go to a networking event. Because, yeah, you know those familiar. People, don't you? And it's just the way we process people around us and conversations and everything. And it's not about like specific thing or label, or it's not about autism necessarily. There are lots of other things that have different social processing. It's just our brains are different, and it's some process things one way, some others. And there are different coping mechanisms we can have to help us create this safe environment for social processing. And if we are running a company, then probably having large events to make everyone bond is not a great idea, because there will be a group of people who will feel horrified by the whole thing. And for them, it won't be a bonding experience. It will be hell. So how do you create those social connection, knowing that you have a diverse team, not just visually, but also diverse team of different types of brains that are all incredible and all add different value, but how do you create this culture and environment where everyone can actually be the best selves? And I like I think specifically ADHD was described as having a race car without brakes. So you need to learn how to, like, having a race car basically is amazing. Why not? But not knowing how to use brakes is not so fun in a race car. So basically all the things in neurodiverse topic are incredible superpowers that can be used for so many great things and can speed up things, can take things to the next level. But if we don't have the tools and the environments where everyone who's neurodiverse feels safe and feels like they can be their best selves, then you're really missing out.
Yeah. And I think it's so powerful. And I really appreciate that you incorporate that into the academy, because it's so powerful to know, because everybody just maybe thinks they're a normal race car, but then somebody's missing their brakes, but they don't know, because maybe it's the topic that's not talked about, or maybe there's a lot of taboo or judgment around that. So they don't even want to think about that. But then when you find out you don't have brakes, it's this beautiful aha moment. So whenever somebody tells me that they have a diagnosis, I'm, oh my God, congratulations, because now you can learn how to work with that. And I hope, and so I really love that you're incorporating that into the academy. Yeah.
So it's again, it's a big topic. It's also for me very personal. Having dyslexia, I just mentioned I'm a school dropout. Hey, how did that happen? Because very simply, the systems that were provided for me, I couldn't do it, and I think Morgan and I we also discussed this in another podcast where we said, you also kind of talked about how you see other people and they do these things and they do it without any problems. It's all easy. They're just going through life and work and whatever, and it seems all logical. And you go like, I should do that too. They're expecting that from me. And yes, they are expecting that from you because everybody does it. And you're like, well, okay, here I go. I'll have a job and I'll go to this thing, or I go to this school and I'll do what they do. And you can't. And you go like, I get really stressed and tired and I just can't produce. I can't deliver on time. I can't do these things they do. How do they do that? I must be stupid. I must be crazy. I must be broken. Right. And that is such a, and so love to also have you chip in on this one, Morgan, but because I know you've experienced that as well, and I think that's a powerful kind of realization. But for people with dyslexia, it's not about writing and reading. That's not the main thing. It's actually that is the. I mean, although people at my school, when I was still at school, they said I wanted to be a journalist. They said, you can't be a journalist because you can't spell. Like, okay, hey. Now we have Chat GPT. Amazing things are happening for people with dyslexia. Anyway,
spell check.
Yes, spell check also. Whoa. Anyway, but because of my daughter, she also has dyslexia, so I see it in her as well. There's something else which is way more impactful, which is social. So something you talked about. People with dyslexia often find it difficult to kind of act the same way as people do. They connect differently to groups and to social things. So this has been something that has really, it's been a big problem for me in work. This is why I always started my own company. I always have to leave. I always look for the way out. Wherever I am, I look for where's the exit, because I know that I come across as normal usually. He's like, he's normal, he can do things, and then all of a sudden I'm gone and I'm distracted and I'm doing other things and I can't connect to people the way other people do, specifically groups. It's something that has to do. It's not just with dyslexia, but it's very strong with people who have dyslexia. But that's not recognized. But it is sort of irritating for people who you work with. It can be such a stressful or weird situation, and it's not a precise thing. It's not like it's this, Oh yeah, you can't do that. So anyway, Morgan,
and I'm really curious because and you mentioned that when you guys are going through the screening, amazing that you have 5,000 applicants for 30 spots. Do you find and I don't know what the application processes are, but do you find that you have a higher profile of neurodiverse applicants?
100%. I would say every second person at the interview stage mentions their neurodiversity, which makes me incredibly happy, which also makes me think that creativity and neurodiversity are very directly linked.
Of course they are.
And talking about labels, I hate all the labels that currently exist that make it sound like something you need to cure or something, which is not about curing anyone. Again, I'm not an expert on the topic, and there are lots of other nuances to it. But from the creative perspective and empowering teams to run, it's all about creating that environment that will support them. And we actually did that after we now became aware of the topic as a team as well. And there are so many things that you don't think about. For example, there are certain people that need to know how the room looks before coming into the room, that will actually reduce their anxiety. And if they know what exactly will be happening in the meeting, what the agenda is, again, that will reduce anxiety a lot. So there are lots of small things that can be done. So we decided as a team to actually run this kind of iOS experiment. So our team iOS. So how do we operate as a team? And if anyone interested, I'm happy to share our Miro board that we had with the team, basically where we wrote down lots of different things around what stresses us out, like how do we feel most productive, and kind of all sorts of very, very small things. And it was so eye-opening just to hear from everyone in our team the small things that you've never even thought about, because they're not you. They don't bother you. So you never thought they might bother anyone. But then you say something that really stresses you out, this tiny thing that just can ruin your whole day because, I don't know, you can't deal with noise behind you. And if there is any noise behind you, you literally cannot concentrate. And everyone's like, really? That's your big problem? And it was so incredible and eye-opening to just for everyone to share. And now we have this menu of me kind of document where everyone has kind of how they prefer to communicate, whether they prefer writing or talking or WhatsApp or an email or small communication bits or kind of large chunks of information. There are so many ways in which we miss out on full potential of a person just because we didn't set up the process right. And it's so easy to do it.
But if you do, if you do this with these MBAers, so now I see this lecture room with all these mostly boys. I don't know why. I think it's different. I hope it's
don't know why
now.
at all.
Yeah, it's but anyway, so if you do this with them, I bet you get all kinds of people that are so different and have all their little quirks and different ways of thinking. And you get people with dyslexia, you get people with, all kinds of, it's a neurodiverse group anyway. I think so. Making that explicit would be such a great, and I'm pretty sure there are lots of MBAs who do this as well, by the way, because they're not stupid. Obviously, they're smart people. They know that too. But it's such a beautiful way of showing sort of the diversity in any room or any group of people. And then you like, oh yeah, because that liberates you. You go like, oh, so you're broken too.
I think we're all broken as humans.
And I think, and it also inspires me because as someone whose brain operates differently, I'm constantly looking at the world and like, okay, how can I fit in? How can I make it work? And now I'm realizing, okay, it doesn't have to be like that. There's other ways to operate and make it better for myself. But then I would see, oh, okay, I assume this is the standard, so I have to fit into that standard too. But then when you hear, oh, there's other ways of communicating, right? WhatsApp, email, phone calls, in person, right? Just even knowing that I have that option or I have those choices already inspires me. Like, oh my God, I don't have to stress out about this email to my boss. I can just say, hey, can we have a chat after lunch? And that makes and that's always very inspiring for myself because I didn't, particularly in this communication method, I didn't realize how much it was stressing me out sometimes. So then to have a colleague say, well, yeah, no, I prefer not to email if possible. I just try to arrange a moment to chat with people. I was like, oh my God, that's so brilliant. I never thought about it. I thought I just always had to email everybody.
So I think we come to sort of the conclusion that whether we talk about creative leadership or design leadership, this is actually the core of what we all have to do, right? It is.
Email
this
people?
Is actually email. You have to give them either email or send me WhatsApp. Basically, that's the thing.
But I think
options.
And I think it comes back to being curious, because even if you have a room full of white shirt business students, right, and you peel back that first layer, say, yeah, okay, I'm not interested in a room full of business students, but then you can peel back that layer and get curious, then you're going to start to see.
Oh, 100% agree. And by the way, I don't want anyone who is currently wearing a white shirt to feel like they need to change it.
They're crying. They're like,
it's a metaphor.
It's a metaphor. And definitely
I'm neurodiverse as well.
And again, MBAs do attract lots of neurodiverse people and there are different people, but I suppose the environment doesn't allow them to show their real selves. That's what I'm trying to say. But definitely every single person who comes in your room, they're always different. There are so many things that we don't see. And if we don't give a permission for people to show up as whatever they want, then it will be harder for them to break that barrier.
Yeah, but you are doing something with Future London Academy that is sort of, it is an intervention, right? I mean, there is a reason why somehow you are needed, right? So, I mean, so that's what you're doing. You're saying, hey, I need to kind of insert this other thing into the system. So because we need to change. Something needs to happen, right?
Yeah. And I think you also mentioned before we talk about what is the future. And again, we all here kind of in very present, but preparing for what the future of the world might be, future of leadership. And going back to intervention and what needs to change, I believe that the future of leadership, whether we call it design leadership, or maybe in the future will be just called leadership. It doesn't need creative leadership or design leadership. It just by default means you do connect all sorts of dots within the organization. But it is very much about having the broader perspective. Whether you do come from a finance and you became that leader of a large organization, but then you need to open up to all the other dots there around you and understand what they mean and how you can connect them. Whether you do come from creative background and you start understanding more about the business and every other aspect of company. So one is about this connecting the dots. Another, going back to your name of your podcast, is about human. We can't forget that we still deal with humans, no matter how much we optimize. It is about understanding who you are as a human and being empathic to other humans around you. And this is incredibly important not to forget that, no matter how much progress we make in the world. And the third about the planet of like, okay, we live within our city, country, company, team, whatever, but we all live now in a broader context of the world and the planet. And we should never forget that context, whether we look at it from the cultural perspective, geopolitical perspective, sustainable perspective. We should always have that broader view of everything we're doing. Why are we doing what are we bringing to this world? What are we leaving behind us? And that's what I would love every leader in this world to think about, not just how they get into the next quarter and what the P&L looks like, but what are we bringing to this world?
Good point. And I want to kind of talk about something that that kind of links to we to language, because we talked about the language is such an important thing, and is it for you? So I'm proposing a sort of an idea. This might be wrong, but I think that people who have traveled, who have lived in different cultures, who speak different languages, they are way ahead of people who haven't. So do you think that in your case, because you speak Russian, you speak French, you speak English, I don't know, maybe more languages, you have experienced different cultures, so do you think that has been part of why you kind of are able to see sort of this need, and you were able to kind of say, okay, because you can understand different kind of bubbles?
It's obviously difficult to say about something you only had one experience of. So this is my life, and clearly it led me to where I am. So I think the answer is yes. But in general, I would say that the broader experiences you have, the more you travel, the more things you see, the more curious you are. Of course, you'll have more different questions and more different things that you'll come up with. So I definitely think it helped, but it's difficult for me to say because I don't have a clone of me who had exactly the same life, but only spoke one language, but never left the country.
Yeah, exactly. So that'll be interesting to know. Like having a twin would be worse. We something like, you see, you're so boring. You're a linear, boring person. I am. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know if you can say that, but I think I truly think if we go back to what we talked about, creativity and connecting the dots and sort of having sort of experiences, I think being able to kind of tap into these different experiences, but also different languages. I think that's because you're the founder, co-founder of Future London Academy, within a context that and you work with people from all over the world. I think having that experience enables you to also deal with the complexity of what you're doing, right? Because if you don't know anything of the world, if you haven't been in different cultures, how can you bring these people together and actually be able to say, or just noticing that they do things differently because you come from a different place, or I think and what I'm trying to say is that if you haven't traveled, if you haven't experienced different cultures, if you haven't done so, you're missing out.
100% agree. 100%. If there is anyone listening right now who hasn't traveled or been in other countries, buy a ticket now. Today is your day.
Okay.
Leave immediately.
It's a random country, just like whatever is available now. Just take that plane and just go.
Or also, I would recommend a book, Culture Map, which I'm sure you talked about and a lot of your listeners know. But again, that has been such an eye-opener for me because it talks about different cultures and how we perceive the same things in such a different way, including how we think about time or how we think about relationships or work. And because of that, we have so much miscommunication because we run international companies and teams, but also just reading it gave me so much perspective on things that I actually don't know. And again, I'm privileged to have mixture of different cultures in me, but I'm also not aware of so many other cultures that are out there that I haven't had a privilege to experience. So I think, having an open mind to everything there is around you. And check out the Culture Map book. Recommended highly.
That's great. Yeah. So because of time, I think we should wrap it up. I don't know, Morgan, do you have any last? Because I could talk about this for hours. Because even that book opened up a whole thing.
A whole thing.
Where you're like, it's so cool. So we'll. I think it would be great to have you back.
Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
That'd be very nice. So,
but I think the biggest thing is, it's what you started with in the beginning as well, curiosity, and that's the secret sauce, I think.
100%.
Exactly. Yeah, and give yourself permission to be that curious person.
Yeah.
I love this. And I feel like, there are so many more topics that we didn't discuss that I would love to discuss. So if any listeners out there feel like we should have a second conversation, please message me. I would love to know, because you never know when you do podcasts, you never know who's on the other side. And if they absolutely hated the conversation or they're like, this was really good, because you leave an amazing conversation and you might never know what people thought of it.
But
so
I think I can be sure of one thing, that if they really, really hated the conversation, they are not listening to this bit of the podcast.
Love it.
But if you do,
be survivors. If you're out there, reach out. Don't be shy. Say, what did you learn?
Or maybe they were stuck in a car and their father or their mother, and they were in the back. And
you should listen to this.
Yeah,
curiosity is important.
Then we are very sorry. I'm sorry.
Very sorry. I apologize. You might have to listen to it again if we do it again.
Yeah, exactly.
But thank you for everyone to getting to this point. It takes a lot of capacity in the brain to listen to something and really, really listen to it. So thank you for staying with this conversation for so long.
Yeah. Awesome. And thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.